Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So in the last video, okay, remember that they're changing my voice. So in the last video, I made it clear that oversight confounds all the arguments coming from the right and anywhere else. Slightly raising taxes isn't the same as socialism or communism or working toward socialism. And notice at this time they're also saying that there's some kind of Islamic takeover, what have you. And it's safe to say they're paying people to feed into that idea. Pretty straightforward. So obviously there needs to be vice taxes and luxury taxes to build rehabs. And it won't cost that much money, right? If you don't want to spend too much money on luxuries, you won't be paying that much taxes on luxuries, right? If you don't want to spend too much money on vices, you won't be paying that much taxes on vices. It's very simple. And these will, we could bring in $36 billion a year to build and operate rehabs, a much needed process, much needed. So this leads me to my next point here. Point number 3. Black people are twice as likely as white people to be beneath the poverty line in America. So in America, black Americans are twice as likely to be under the poverty line or poor as white Americans. Now, when right-wing people are telling you that it has nothing to do with the system, they are subtly or otherwise saying it has to do with genetics. Okay, it's the nature versus nurture debate. They are also saying that it has to do with culture to some degree. They often bring up single-parent homes. They might bring up thug culture, rap culture, what have you. You got to realize that corporate criminals do far more damage than street criminals. It doesn't even come close. And logic would tell you that there's a lot more of them depending on where you draw the line. So there's a much bigger problem that they're not addressing because they're cultural imperialists and racial supremacists. So they don't care if you look at it more in terms of its genetics, and they don't care if you look at it more in terms of its culture. And keep in mind that these urban gang cultures, these urban thug cultures, have been marketed to the black community by the oppressive groups in society. Not just rich whites and rich Jews as the sum total output of their group, with some people not being a big fan of it or whatever, some people with their heads down, some people leading the charge, okay? But by any other people who seek to benefit from it, token minorities, what have you. So they've marketed in them their cultures, they've social engineered, they've urban planned, urban development, okay? They choose where the liquor stores go, right? Zoning, where the schools are, what they teach. They choose a lot of things that make it so things play out a certain way. It is their poor governance that has caused the problem. If we look at, for example, Benin has a lower crime rate than the United States of America, even though there are more black people, not more black people, but there's a higher percentage of black people in Benin than there are in the United States of America. So if we follow their genetic thinking, their genetic arguments, to the finish, right? If we follow their train of thoughts to the finish in regards to genetics, where would it take us? It will take us that black people actually have superior genes. But that's the proof is insufficient, okay? The real reason has to do with who's governing who. Are reasonable black people governing the country? Or are unreasonable white supremacists, Jewish supremacists, LGBT supremacists, and token minorities governing the country? And so when we look at Benin, right, it's a mix between people who mean well with their head down a little bit and people who don't mean so well, who are more greedy. But because of the exact social dynamic and their exact position in the greater geopolitical structure, they have a lower crime rate. Okay, so let's look at my point number 4 here. So the education system, the job system are made for white people and by white people. Now you might say, duh. That's obvious, right? It's America, look at American history, and it should be very clear to you. It was very clear to me as a kid. I didn't miss that for a moment. I understood why black people quite often get worse grades in school. It wasn't any mystery to me. right? Who's teaching? What teaching style? What cultural implications are there? What cultural styles of teaching? What kind of forms of learning? When am I more interested in a topic? When am I less interested? The more boring types of students tend to be more attentive to boring topics, and so on and so forth. It's pretty straightforward. Like if you're a nerd, you're likely to get better grades than if you're an exciting jock or thug or what have you. It was pretty straightforward. But not to the conservatives, because they tend to play completely stupid about this. So just because it was made for white people, by white people, doesn't mean you should keep it that way. Right? You should find out how people learn and adjust it accordingly, and make sure everything is fair and just and right. Make sure everything is what? Fair and just and right. And I don't speak in code, mind you. So certain groups of people of color have certain cultural histories coupled with their current social and economic circumstances, which are more conducive to academic success in the white system. So in other words, if you're from the most ambitious of Asians and you come to America, you're probably going to get good grades. And because black people are the most stigmatized and persecuted of the peoples in America, basically, even with all this Islamophobia and all this other stuff, this anti-immigrant stuff going on, okay, it's the black Muslims that are hated the most. It's the black immigrants that are hated the most. Believe it or not, if you think about it, you'll see that I'm right. Okay, so it's stupid to compare the minorities that white people like the most to the ones that they hate the most, right? Generally speaking, as the sum total output of their groups, with some dissenters, some people with their heads down, what have you. Now, for those of you who are still unconvinced because you're like retarded or something, well, what happens when the most ambitious of Nigerians come to America? Historically, there were points at least, I don't know how it is now, where they outscored even Asians. They were the most successful ethnic demographic when it comes to academics, right? When it comes to the average degree of education of any demographic in the country, including Asians from Asia, and Asians as a group. Now, how could that be? Because they know I'm right. So bear with me, I'll try to wrap this up quickly. I was saying that they were the most successful demographic as a group. These are not only black people, but black people from Africa. So the argument that the Western system is a superior system to any system out there is nonsense. Okay? For example, I myself am mostly self-taught. I'm mostly self-taught. I only have a bachelor's degree in college. I'm mostly self-taught. And I'm constantly sabotaged. And countless people from the opposition view are from Ivy League schools. And they fear debating me because they are satisfied with the fact that they're not qualified to debate me. Now, how could that be? Well, quite often when you go to an Ivy League school, they teach you things that they don't quite teach you at other schools. Oh, wow. See, there's that background noise. The same thing is happening here at the park. It was happening by earlier, like several blocks away or so. Anyway, it's like I was saying, I don't know if it's just going to show up in the video. I'm mostly self-taught, right? So they know that education is very superficial. Okay, what really matters when it comes to intelligence is moral intelligence. If somebody is smarter than everyone else, they're going to be moral, right? There's no way to be smarter than everyone else without being moral. There's being book smart to a high degree without being moral. Great, lovely. But the smart person is going to be moral, and they understand that. Hell, who doesn't understand that since you're a kid, right? Are you better off being Lex Luthor or Superman? When your life is all said and done, when it's time to meet your maker, for those you are agnostic, do you not address the possibility of meeting your maker if you're smart? If you're an atheist, do you not look at a world full of people who aren't atheists, who are far more intelligent than atheists are, quite often are far less weird than Dawkins was, and far less in the category of wasting their lives as Dawkins. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but it'll say is or was. Okay. They look at the world and say, well, those guys are a lot smarter than atheists. Doesn't that tell you that you should prepare to meet your maker, that you should be moral? Doesn't it feel better to be good than bad? Why do you have a conscience? What are the deeper implications of having a conscience? And there's so many things that make it clear, right? Like Martin Luther King said, he had a PhD for what it's worth. He said, You should judge people by the content of their character, not their degree of education. So what is their true worth? What makes them smart, right? Having character. Because if you don't use intelligence to be more moral than you otherwise would be, to be as moral as you can be, you're not very smart. You think Dick Dastardly from the Wacky Racers cartoon has the ideal relationships? Do you think, some drug addict or drug dealer is the most romantic person? Do you think having a good heart factors in when it comes to loving your family or your significant others, or loving yourself, or living the life to the best of your ability? So as we look at the situation, it is painfully obvious that one must be moral if they're going to be smart. And any claims of intelligence, of being intelligent, that are void of being uncontrolled opposition out of a desire to be righteous, out of a great effort to be righteous, are nonsensical claims. If one isn't smart enough to be righteous and to take risks as a result, then one isn't smart. They don't have a lot of brain power. They're letting fear prevent them from making the smarter decision. So who are the smartest people in history? They're the most moral people in history. So how do you keep your nation from being smart? You insist on them being conservatives, because conservatives are not moral, for the reasons I've discussed in this series and more. They refuse to let people morally progress. Even the word evolution can be seen as a play on words for evil you shun. If you don't shun that part of you that wants to be evil, then you're not going to be moral. You're not going to be smart. The word morality can be seen as a play on words for more reality. We see in the Bible that says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. How do you become wise? Wisdom, being wise is the highest form of being intelligent. You have to first be moral. What happens when you fear the Lord? You become moral. If you truly fear the Lord.